Welcome back to the HFY Core, the ultimate home for humanity's greatest stories. If you love seeing underdogs tear down arrogant galactic empires, you are in the perfect place. Today, we travel to the hyper-futuristic year of 4025, where aliens made the fatal mistake of trying to conquer a Category 9 death world. Hit that subscribe button, turn up your volume, and let's dive deep into today's epic tale, the Death Worlders' Playground. The year was 4025, and Earth had become the crown jewel of known human civilization. The skies no longer belonged to birds, they belonged to floating continents of glass and chrome, suspended miles above the oceans by massive quantum gravity engines. Vast, engineered forests glowed with bioluminescent trees that converted carbon dioxide into pure energy, while rivers of clean power flowed through transparent channels beneath every street. Disease had been eradicated by molecular nanobots, and hunger existed only as a bleak footnote in digital history archives. Humanity had conquered nearly every physical challenge nature had ever thrown at them, turning their unforgiving home into a technological paradise. Yet, for all their dazzling advancement, humans remained beautifully, stubbornly human. They still laughed uproariously at bad jokes, wept openly at funerals, celebrated birthdays with chaotic enthusiasm, and sat together under artificial stars telling ancient stories. They possessed an inner warmth, an unpredictable emotional depth, and a capacity for irrational hope that no logic-driven alien civilization could ever truly comprehend or replicate. To the cold, calculating empires of the outer cosmos, this emotional volatility looked like a critical system flaw, a weakness waiting to be exploited by a superior mind, far beyond the safety of Earth's orbit, hidden within the radiation-choked darkness surrounding Jupiter. Something ancient and deeply malevolent watched. The vanguard of the Gorgon Empire had arrived in total secrecy. Their flagship was a monstrosity of engineering, larger than entire human megacities combined. It was a living, breathing warship constructed from bioengineered flesh, obsidian armor scales, and organic circuitry that pulsed with a sickening green energy. Deep inside its throbbing command chamber sat Queen Vexta, the immortal telepathic ruler of thousands of conquered worlds, her eyes fixed on the blue planet. For 10 consecutive Earth years, Queen Vexta ruthlessly observed humanity. Her hidden subquantum sensors intercepted every digital communication, mapped every military orbital defense exercise, analyzed every scientific breakthrough, and cataloged every perceived psychological weakness. She watched their simulated wargames and tracked their law enforcement networks, believing she was building the perfect tactical profile to dismantle their civilization. Her scientists continuously reported strange, baffling observations that defied all known galactic evolutionary logic, leaving the High Command in a state of perpetual disbelief. According to the data, these humans willingly and regularly consumed chemical compounds that were considered highly lethal across most of the civilized galaxy. Capsaicin, ethanol, caffeine, and nicotine were ingested daily in massive quantities. Entire alien research divisions flatly refused to believe the telemetry, arguing that no sentient species could poison its own nervous system for recreational enjoyment and survive. Yet humans did it daily, smiling through the chemical burning of their food and drinks, treating lethal toxicity as nothing more than a casual weekend refreshment. Even more terrifying to the observers was Earth itself. The planet was classified by galactic cartographers as a Category 9 death world, a stellar nightmare defined by violent atmospheric storms, hypermutating microorganisms, apex predators, ambient radiation, extreme tectonic instability, and wild temperature variations. To the rest of the galaxy, such a world was a localized hell, a place of execution or exile. Yet humans didn't merely survive its harsh conditions, they domesticated them, turning the hostile wilderness into a sprawling playground for their children and treating danger as an adventure sport. Queen Vexta quickly realized a brutal truth: a direct, conventional orbital invasion would inevitably fail. If threatened with extinction, these Deathworlders would unleash a level of primal ferocity that would decimate her fleet. When humans fought for their survival, their civilized facade melted away, and they became absolute monsters of lethal ingenuity. To conquer Earth, she could not use blunt force, she had to use a quieter, crueler, and far more insidious method that would neutralize their terrifying evolutionary willpower before they realized they were under attack. 1 year later, the silent invasion was already fully underway while humanity celebrated a golden age of peace. Hidden beneath the deep oceans, volcanic mountains, arid deserts, and floating megacities, thousands of microscopic alien drones tunneled miles into Earth's crust. They quietly planted massive tectonic disruptors, plasma harvesters, and low-frequency neural dispersal chambers directly beneath the major population centers. The operations were so perfectly masked by quantum cloaking fields that not even Earth's most advanced planetary AI surveillance systems detected the threat. Meanwhile, inside the fluid-filled biological laboratories of Vexta's flagship, genetic shamans engineered a molecular virus unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. It was not designed to kill the host, nor was it meant to degrade their physical capabilities. It was designed to steal something far more valuable: their choice, their individual identity, and their personal freedom. It targeted the unique electromagnetic signature of the human prefrontal cortex, transforming the brain into a passive receiver for the Queen's telepathic commands. When the final preparations were complete, Queen Vexta looked down at the glowing blue marble and smiled. The trap snapped shut at exactly midnight Greenwich Mean Time. The hidden subterranean dispensers activated simultaneously, releasing a colorless, odorless, and completely invisible mist into the global ventilation and atmospheric currents. Within minutes, billions of unsuspecting humans inhaled the pathogen. People collapsed instantly in their homes, in crowded restaurants, inside high-speed transit stations, during formal weddings, and at children's birthday parties. A suffocating, unnatural silence fell over the world's greatest metropolises as the virus rapidly rewrote their neural pathways. In New Tokyo, a mother suddenly dropped the birthday cake she was carrying, the colorful frosting splattering across the pristine kitchen floor as her body went rigid. In Neo-London, a young engineer collapsed directly beside the shimmering holographic wedding proposal he was about to present to his girlfriend. In a quiet park in New York, a grandfather reading stories to his grandchildren simply stopped speaking mid-sentence, his book tumbling into the grass. When these billions of individuals opened their eyes a few agonizing moments later, their human warmth was entirely gone. Their irises now glowed with a sickening, uniform purple light. The entire human race had been converted into a massive, collective puppet network, and Queen Vexta held every single string. At that exact moment of psychological submission, the ground beneath the city split apart with a deafening roar. Massive, three-legged alien tripods emerged from beneath the Earth's crust, towering war machines that cast long, ominous shadows over the silent streets. Heavy plasma beams rained down from the sky, instantly vaporizing defense grids, orbital defense platforms, and military headquarters. Within 72 hours, humanity's greatest civilization had fallen to its knees. They lost not because they were weak, but because they never even knew they were fighting a war until their own hands refused to obey their commands. Among this global horror was a 14-year-old boy named Rogers. He watched in paralyzed shock as his mother suddenly collapsed onto the living room floor. His father rushed forward, frantically trying to wake her, but within seconds, his father's body convulsed as well. When they both stood up, their eyes burned with that cold, empty purple fire. For one terrifying second, his parents looked directly at him. There was no love in their eyes, no recognition, no warmth. To them, he was no longer a son, he was just an unindexed biological resource, an anomaly that needed to be integrated into the new regime. "Run!" his mother whispered, a violent tremor shaking her jaw as she fought the virus for a final, desperate microsecond. It was the last free word she would ever speak. Turning on his heel, Rogers bolted out into the chaotic night, running blindly into the neon-lit ruins as the world burned around him. 15 brutal years passed, and the surface of Earth was transformed into a mechanized hellscape. The beautiful floating cities were grounded, turned into massive, smog-belching foundries where billions of enslaved, purple-eyed humans worked endlessly beneath a sky choked with green chemical pollution. Children were born into chains, growing up without ever knowing the concept of free will, while entire generations forgot what Earth's real, unpolluted sun looked like. The Gorgons believed they had completely broken the spirit of the planet, assuming their victory was permanent. But humanity was not extinct, it had simply gone underground, returning to its evolutionary roots as a subterranean apex predator. Deep within the forgotten maintenance tunnels, abandoned hyper-transit systems, and collapsed mining networks, the survivors organized. They called themselves the Ghosts of Earth, moving silently through the shadows of the old world. Every single survivor carried deep physical scars, devastating personal loss, and an ocean of cold, calculated rage that grew stronger with each passing day in the dark. Through meticulous, dangerous experimentation on captured alien drones, the Resistance discovered a critical breakthrough: the Gorgon psychic network could be disrupted. The virus could not be cured by conventional medicine, but its telepathic control signal could be violently blocked. The solution, however, came at a horrific cost. It required the surgical implantation of a crude, unshielded neural chip directly into the skull. The procedure had to be performed without anesthesia to monitor brain activity, and many died on the operating tables or suffered permanent brain damage. But those who survived the agonizing integration became completely immune to the Queen's psychic frequency. For the first time in 15 long years, a small faction of humans could think, plan, and hate with absolute freedom. That hard-won freedom immediately became a lethal weapon. Rogers was no longer the frightened 14-year-old boy who had fled into the night. He was now 29, a battle-hardened commander whose body was a testament to the brutality of the underground war. More than half of his physical form had been replaced by salvaged machinery. His left arm was a heavy synthetic prosthetic capable of crushing solid steel, his spine was reinforced with titanium plating, and his lungs were partially cybernetic after years of breathing the toxic, unfiltered air of the subterranean tunnels. But the most profound damage he carried was entirely emotional. Every failed raid, every makeshift funeral, every comrade lost in the dark, and every child buried in the dirt had left an invisible mark on his soul. He didn't let the grief break him, he compressed it, turning the agony into pure kinetic fuel for his mission. One night, after returning from a bloody ambush on an alien fuel convoy, Rogers found a small girl sitting quietly near the heat of the Resistance's makeshift plasma fire. She couldn't have been older than 8, her face covered in soot, her eyes staring blankly at the flames. "What's your name, kiddo?" Rogers asked, his deep voice softening as he knelt beside her on the cold concrete. "Mira," she whispered without looking up. "Where are your parents?" he asked gently. The girl remained silent, her hands gripping a small, torn piece of a human flag. Rogers didn't ask further, he already knew the devastating answer. The Gorgons had taken them, sweeping them into the surface boundaries like billions of others. In the weeks that followed, Mira became the daughter Rogers never thought he would have in this broken world. He taught her how to survive, how to mask her thermal signature, and how to maintain a plasma rifle. For the first time since the night his parents' eyes turned purple, Rogers remembered exactly what he was fighting for. He wasn't just fighting for bloody revenge anymore, he was fighting for a future. Months later, the Resistance's deep space scanners detected an impossible tactical anomaly. Queen Vexta herself had descended from orbit, establishing a massive obsidian fortress in the ruins of humanity's grandest floating capital. The tech thieves of the Resistance quickly discovered that the entire global occupation network and the viral control frequency depended directly on her unique biological and psionic signature. The tactical equation was simple: kill the Queen, and you free the entire planet in a single stroke. But no strike team that had ever approached her fortress had ever returned alive. The primary obstacle wasn't the thousands of heavily armed alien shock troops patrolling the obsidian walls. It was the two biological horrors that guarded the entrance to her inner throne room, Ignis and Glacies, the legendary cyber dragons. They were colossal, genetically engineered living weapons of mass destruction. Entire human battalions had been completely erased from existence by their elemental fury. Some Resistance legends claimed Ignis could melt entire mountain ranges with its breath, while others swore Glacies could freeze a human so fast their cells would instantly shatter like cheap glass. The final assault was launched during the largest chemical storm recorded since the beginning of the occupation. Pitch-black clouds rolled across the poisoned sky, and blinding sheets of green lightning illuminated the skeletal ruins of the surrounding skyscrapers. Roger's elite five-man strike team moved like phantoms through the flooded maintenance shafts directly beneath the fortress. Nobody spoke a word through the comms. They all understood the mathematical odds of the mission. This wasn't a standard military operation, it was a voluntary suicide pact for the survival of their species. Before breaching the final reinforced bulkheads leading to the upper corridors, the team's demolition expert stopped, pulling a small, crumpled physical photograph from inside his armor. It showed a smiling woman and two young boys, a memory from a life that had been stolen 15 years ago. He kissed the image gently, tucked it securely near his heart, and racked the bolt of his heavy plasma cannon. No one said a word to him. No one needed to. Every single member of the team carried their own ghosts into the light. When the heavy blast doors were blown off their hinges, absolute hell erupted inside the grand corridor. Ignis and Glacies descended from the vaulted ceiling with a terrifying, synchronized roar that shook the very foundations of the fortress. The air became a chaotic vortex of extreme thermal energy and absolute zero frost. The battle lasted only a few desperate minutes, yet to the soldiers involved, it felt like an eternity of screaming metal, blinding explosions, and the smell of ozone and burning synthetic flesh. One by one, the strike team members paid the ultimate price to open a path for their commander. The heavy gunner's right arm was completely severed by a blast of razor-sharp cosmic ice from Glacies, yet he used his remaining hand to pin the beast's jaw down with a heavy gravitational stake. The stealth assassin suffered horrific third-degree plasma burns while drawing Ignis's fire away from the team's position. The tech thief nearly died from neural shock while uploading an EMP overload script directly into Glacies' cybernetic spinal core. With a final, desperate explosion of thermite charges planted by the demolition expert, the two seemingly invincible monsters collapsed into the ruined floor, their massive bodies smoking as their internal energy cores ruptured. For the first time in 15 years, something the Gorgon Empire considered gods had been bled and slaughtered by human hands. Humanity had proven that even their worst nightmares could be broken. Leaving his fallen team behind, his armor battered and his synthetic arm sparking violently, Rogers threw open the massive obsidian doors of the inner sanctum. Queen Vexta waited for him on a towering throne of cold metal. She was ancient, multi-limbed, and terrifyingly grand, her countless black eyes focusing on the lone, bleeding human soldier walking toward her. "You are nothing but insects," her voice hissed directly into the corridors of Roger's mind, a telepathic force so dense it made his vision blur. "You should have remained in the dirt where you belong." Rogers didn't flinch. He gripped his high-frequency energy blade with both hands, his cybernetic eye locking onto her central chest core. "You should have left our playground alone," he growled, the psychic battle that followed shook the structural integrity of the entire fortress. Queen Vexta unleashed an unimaginable wave of raw mental force, bypassing his neural chip by sheer volume of power. Devastating memories exploded before Roger's eyes in a blinding montage of torment. He saw his mother's terrified face, his childhood home burning, every tactical failure he had ever overseen, every friend who had died screaming in the dark, and every deep-seated fear he had tried to suppress. She weaponized his entire life's trauma against him, trying to crush his spirit. But the alien monarch made a fundamental, fatal mistake. She believed that pain and grief weaken humans, operating under the assumption that a broken mind will always surrender. She could never comprehend that for a Deathworlder, pain is not a weakness, it is the very anvil upon which their survival instinct is forged. Instead of breaking, Rogers used the agonizing memories as fuel, channeling his immense grief into absolute, unyielding focus. He stood tall against the telepathic storm, his heavy boots crushing the obsidian floor as he forced himself forward step by agonizing step. Now! Rogers roared through his throat comms, signaling the barely conscious tech thief outside. With a final surge of strength, the thief activated the Resistance's global signal amplifier, hooking Rogers' neural chip directly into the fortress's primary broadcast array. Instantly, the collective emotional spectrum of the human race flooded straight into Queen Vexta's singular consciousness. It wasn't just a wave of anger or revenge, it was an overwhelming tidal wave of love, hope, devastating grief, roaring laughter, ultimate sacrifice, and unbreakable determination. The accumulated emotional weight of billions of human lives, forged through centuries of surviving a Category 9 death world, crashed into her clinical, orderly psychic network like a localized supernova. The sheer chaos of human emotion was toxic to her mind. For the first time in her 1,000-year immortal life, Queen Vexta felt a sensation she had never known, absolute, paralyzing terror. Rogers saw the sudden panic in her countless eyes as her psychic defenses shattered. Leaping through the air in a blur of chrome and steel, he brought his white-hot energy blade down. The blade pierced her central biocore with explosive force. A massive shockwave of blinding purple energy erupted across the chamber, tearing the throne to pieces. Queen Vexta let out a final, agonizing telepathic shriek that echoed across the entire planet, and then her physical form disintegrated into a cloud of harmless ash. Across the surface of the Earth, billions of enslaved humans suddenly stopped walking, stopped working, and dropped their tools. The sickening purple fire instantly vanished from their eyes, replaced by a sudden, overwhelming return of their true selves. Mothers looked down at their hands and wept, husbands recognized their wives across the crowded factory floors, and families fractured by 15 years of darkness reunited in the ruins, crying tears of pure, unadulterated joy. Some stood in absolute silence for hours, staring up at the green skies as the oppressive alien drone network crashed into the dirt around them. The long, dark nightmare of the Gorgon occupation was finally over, torn apart by the stubborn, beautiful will of a species that simply refused to give up its identity. Months turned into years, and Earth began the agonizing but beautiful process of healing its scars. The massive alien factories were torn down, their advanced metals repurposed to rebuild the floating continents of glass and chrome. The sky slowly cleared of pollution, allowing the real, brilliant sun to warm the oceans once more. Massive memorials were erected in the centers of the new cities. They weren't grand statues of generals or monuments to smooth-talking politicians, they were massive walls of reflective black stone covered with millions of ordinary names. Because ordinary people had paid the highest price for freedom. Decades later, an elderly Rogers stood beside a beautifully restored balcony on a floating continent, looking out over the breathtaking expanse of New Earth. The air was crisp, and the laughter of children echoed from the streets below. Beside him stood Mira, no longer the frightened little girl from the underground fire, but a proud, strong leader of humanity's new planetary council. "The galaxy is terrified of us now, old man," she said softly, watching a fleet of human starships ascend into the upper atmosphere. Rogers smiled, his cybernetic eye catching the glint of the sun. They always should have been, he replied. Far beyond the borders of the solar system, the hidden civilizations of the cosmos feverishly studied the classified records of the human Gorgon War. They analyzed the primitive human weapons, their erratic tactics, and their unpredictable biology with deep unease. Every single defensive report compiled by the Galactic High Command ended with the exact same stark warning: a human can be defeated in battle. A human can be severely wounded. A human can even be temporarily enslaved. But a human can never, under any circumstances, be broken. Every arrogant empire in the universe would eventually have to learn the exact same terrifying lesson from the ruins of the Gorgon fleet. Earth is not merely a planet on a star map, it is the sacred home of a species that fundamentally refuses to quit when the odds are against them. Trying to conquer humanity is the fastest, most guaranteed way to discover why Category 9 death worlds create the most adaptable, dangerous, and relentlessly lethal survivors in the known universe. That is why you never, ever underestimate humanity. If Commander Rogers and the ghosts of Earth proved anything today, it is that humans can be bent, but they can never be broken. Thank you for tuning into the HFY Core. If this story gave you goosebumps, smash that like button, drop a comment about your favorite part, and share this with fellow humans. Until next time, stay strong, stay resilient, and remember that Earth is our playground.